Hi, folks. Welcome to Mahoney's Top 10 Supreme Court cases. There are maybe a couple more that should be on this list. Please don't mind my bad spelling. That's okay. But if you can only remember 10, this would be a really, really good list of 10 to remember. So we'll start off with a couple early ones, and we'll start off with Marbury v. Madison. Now, Marbury v. Madison, guys, is all about judicial review. Most of these cases, you don't really have to remember the details. You just have to remember the outcome. Judicial review, only the Supreme Court can declare something unconstitutional. Bam. That's Marbury v. Madison. It establishes the precedent of judicial review. Only the Supreme Court can declare something unconstitutional, not the states. This makes the federal government more powerful. It's as simple as that, folks. We've got to find a way to simplify these cases, and that's a good way to do Marbury v. Madison. I don't even necessarily remember what the case is about. It's not important. It establishes judicial review. McCullough v. Maryland. States can't tax the Bank of the United States. The Bank of the United States is constitutional. Oops. And that's that one, folks. Maryland can't tax the state, or Maryland can't tax the Bank of the United States, and the Bank of the United States is constitutional.
Are you going to share your screen, Mahoney?
Oh, am I not? Turkey, I am. Thanks, Sneath. I'm glad I only got through like one case before that happened. Derp. Okay, there we go. You think I'd be getting better at this by week 7. Can you see that now, Sneath?
Is there any chance to make the document bigger? Or
Yeah.
like zoom into it?
Yep. I'll make my font bigger. Is that a little bit better, Em?
Yeah, it's a lot better. Thank you.
Cool. States can't tax the Bank of the United States. The Bank of the United States is constitutional. This gives more authority to the federal government.
Also, Mahoney, could you maybe say like what's going on during this, or like what kind of evidence this could be used for?
Yeah, sure. I can verbally do that. So that's kind of what I'm doing with this last point on this one, but I'll try to verbalize it too, Sneath. These cases, these first two, they give more authority to the federal government. So any case where they're debating states' rights versus federal authority, these would be great cases. So I'll try to add little lines like that for each one. Like this gives more authority to the federal government. Hopefully that's helpful. But I'll also verbally try to say it. These first three all would be used in any essay regarding state versus federal authority. Yeah, I don't want to underline that. The federal gov can regulate interstate commerce. Hopefully you guys know what that phrase interstate means. It means it occurs between two states. If you are located in the state of California and you do business in Texas and Georgia, you are engaged in interstate commerce. The federal government can regulate you. This is even more power to the Fed. Federal gov. We'll keep it like that. Cool. So there's a little bit of repetition in those three cases, guys. Maybe I could have taken out one of them, but those are all pretty important. They're all martial court. They're all early 1800s. And again, they're about establishing the strength of our federal government. This is really early in America's history where it's not clear how powerful the federal government's going to be. These three early Supreme Court cases determine that the federal government's going to be way more powerful than probably some of the original founders had thought of. Worcester v. Georgia, this is the Taney Court. This is going to be in the 1830s. And we know that a court rules in favor of, actually, I'm going to phrase it like this. The Cherokee are sovereign and have distinct boundaries. Cherokee are sovereign and they have distinct boundaries. Georgia cannot violate Cherokee laws or impose Georgia laws on them. You don't have to remember that this has to do with a missionary named Daniel Worcester. It doesn't matter that you remember that he refuses to swear the oath of allegiance. You have to remember, folks, Cherokee laws are imposed Georgia laws. There we go. Hold on. Again, guys, it's not important remembering that this is about a missionary failing to, take his oath of allegiance to Georgia. It's about understanding that the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Cherokee, and they still get screwed over. President Jackson refuses to enforce the court's order. This is part of Indian removal. So you have to understand that the court rules in favor of the Cherokee, but despite that, Andrew Jackson, his famous line is, "Let Marshall enforce this ruling," and he will continue to allow the state of Georgia to violate Cherokee sovereignty. Dred Scott v. Sanford. This is an important one. This has to do with a slave being brought into free territory. This ruling says that Black people cannot be citizens, so they can't even sue in court. Black people cannot be citizens, therefore they can't even sue in court. It says the federal government has no right to regulate slavery in the territories. That means the Missouri Comp, the Northwest Ordinance are all unconstitutional. That's an oh gosh, I'm so bad at spelling. There we go. I like that big uppercase U. Dred Scott v. Sanford. Black people cannot be citizens, so they can't even sue in court. The federal government has no right to regulate slavery in the territories. And the Missouri Comp and Northwest Ordinance, those are all unconstitutional. That's very important, guys. That is getting rid of that 3630 line. That has essentially blown up that idea and said, nope, if it's not only a state can ban slavery. Nebraska territory, that is not a state. Therefore, the federal government, you can't ban slavery there. Doesn't matter if it's north of any line. Definitely no Dred Scott. Let's do Minor v. Happersett. This is during the Reconstruction era. And this leaves women out of the voting. What is the voting one? That's the 15th Amendment. Leaves women out. Women are citizens, but voting is not considered the right or considered a right. Remember, felons can't vote. Kids can't vote. Yet they're all citizens. Cool. Hopefully that one makes sense for you guys. You got to understand, guys, if you're talking about Reconstruction, you can get that deep analysis point by letting the grader know that women really get left out of that major Reconstruction accomplishment, the 15th Amendment. Felons can't vote. That's funny. Felons can't vote. Kids can't vote. Minor v. Happersett leaves women out of the 15th Amendment. Women are citizens, but voting is not considered right. Cool. Good. Moving right along, we got Plessy Ferguson. And this one, hopefully you guys remember, it says, separate but equal is the law of the land. Discrimination is totally legal as long as, quote, equal accommodations are provided. We know all about that, folks. We know these accommodations are not going to be equal, and this is what essentially allows Jim Crow policies until the 1950s. Does anyone know what Supreme Court case strikes down the Plessy Ferguson decision?
That's Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yeah, right? It sure is. Brown v. Board. And remember, guys, Brown v. Board, it doesn't end segregation overnight. All Brown v. Board does is desegregate public schools. There's going to be so many lawsuits and cases after that to desegregate public accommodations. Guys, think about Rosa Parks. The Rosa Parks Montgomery bus boycott, that comes years after the Brown v. Board decision. They're trying to desegregate public spaces after that. So what the Brown v. Board decision is, guys, it's all about setting a precedent that courts are going to use for decades to strike down every single segregation law that they can. Schenck, sorry, I got ahead of myself. So I guess I'll just type that one out. Brown v. Board. And even though that falls just outside of the time period we're going to be tested on, guys, you got to know that one. You got to know it undoes Plessy Ferguson. Because if you're talking about Plessy Ferguson, which is totally on limits, you can get the deep analysis point by mentioning Brown v. Board. So Brown v. Board undoes Plessy v. Ferguson. Okay. Will be used to strike down basically all segregation laws. Cool. Undoes Plessy v. Ferguson. It says segregation in public schools is not okay, and it will be used to strike down basically all segregation laws. Cool. All right, two more, and they both have to do with war. Both on the same topic. Schenck v. U.S., the Sedition Act is constitutional, and your civil liberties and rights to free speech can be limited in times of war or crisis. Can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. Cause a panic. You can't say whatever you want. The government has the right to limit what you say at certain times. That's what Schenck v. U.S. is all about. Daniel Schenck is handing out anti-draft literature outside of a draft office. He's encouraging men, hey, don't sign up for that thing. Don't give them your time. Don't sign up for the draft, essentially. And that's the case that makes it to the Supreme Court. It's about handing out anti-draft literature. They find Schenck guilty, sentence him to jail. You may not say whatever you want, whenever you want. And the courts have proven that that's true time and time again. Remember, guys, there was an Alien and Sedition Act in 1800 with John Adams, but that never gets challenged by the courts. That's just straight up on the books till it expires after like 2 or 4 years. So we have a very, very serious tradition of curbing your civil liberties when we're in a panic. I'm not saying it's wrong what's happening now with the lockdowns. I'm mixed, but these lockdowns are legal despite what all these protests think, guys. I mean, you hear about people like security guards, getting threatened for telling people to wear masks. You can't step on my right. No, man, the government can totally force you to wear a mask. So people have a really, really misconstrued version and interpretation of what their rights are in this country. They think that they can say anything at any time and the government just can't ever restrict your freedoms. And you might think that, but the courts don't agree with that. And there's a lot of Supreme Court cases to back that up. Anyhow, sorry, I got on a tirade right there. Last one, Korematsu v. U.S. Japanese internment is legal. So I got to know. You don't have to know anything about the man, Fred Korematsu, about his case or whatever. Japanese internment is legal. Why? Because war and stuff. We're scared. When there is a time of crisis or danger, your civil liberties take a back seat. It's important to remember, guys, these are American citizens of Japanese descent. These are people born in the United States. We're not talking about Japanese immigrants who have come here. We're talking about their children that are born in this country. Those are the people that we're talking about them being locked up. If you're not an American citizen, you have different rights. These are American citizens that are interned, and that's why that's so problematic. But it's legit, according to the courts. Those are my top 10, folks. Who has any questions about them? I guess I could write the years as I remember them. Oh, man, early 1800s. I don't remember them. 1800s. Worcester v. Georgia. Oh man, 1830s. Jeez, I'm probably such a bad APUSH teacher. 1857-ish. Minor v. Happerset. Oh man, 1870-ish. During Reconstruction. Plessy Ferguson. I believe that one's 1898, maybe. Schenck v. US is going to be 1918. Korematsu, that is, oh man, is that 44, 45? I'm going to say 45. I can't remember. Brown v. Board's 54. As none of those dates are that important, I'm just trying to put them kind of in context for you so you can ballpark it. I'm going to say 18 teens on these ones. 18 teens. One of them, Marbury v. Madison, I think is earlier. I think it's like 1805 actually. So I'm going to do that one earlier. It's one of the first ones. I'm going to say 1805, something like that. Cool, guys. Those are Mahoney's top 10 Supreme Court cases. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There they are. I will post that. Where should I post that? Where should it live?
Classroom, maybe?
Yeah, I'm just afraid it's going to get buried. I will put it on there, Aaron, but I'm sure it'll get buried on the list. That's okay. I can still put it on there. Cool. Hopefully you guys found that helpful. Any questions before I stop recording?
Yeah, I had one question.
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
How do you use like the Japanese internment? Like, what would you use that for if it was like on a DBQ? Like,
any essay about World War II or about American foreign policy. Okay. I would try to articulate that American foreign policy can sometimes cause us to violate people's civil liberties, whether it's in World War I. Our foreign policy abroad will cause domestic policy at home to change. Domestic policy means at home. Foreign policy means abroad. So, Aaron, any essay about war, whether it's World War I and World War II, we could use Korematsu v. US on. I'm just trying to highlight, even if it's a World War I prompt, we could say that. And just like we'll see in World War I with the Schenck case, our civil liberties being restricted, we'll see that again in another time period, World War II. I'm trying to get that last analysis point right there, Aaron. Do you see how I'm trying to connect to a different period? So
yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Hopefully that's helpful. That would be Korematsu of the U.S. or any essay on nativism. Also, I don't care if they're talking about anti-Irish nativism, anti-Asian, nativism, anti-German, or any anti-Jewish sentiment. Any of that stuff, it's totally appropriate to bring up like the Korematsu v. U.S. because I believe that is not only I believe it's racially motivated. Frankly, we weren't locking up other people. So I think you can argue it's racially motivated. So any essay on nativism, I would also use Korematsu on. What else? Any other questions on these before I stop recording, folks? Okay, we'll stop recording right there.